Hey, what's going on, guys? Hope everyone is doing well. I hope everybody had a great weekend. Hopefully, you found some fun to do while you were stuck inside. Man, this thing is wearing me out. I miss the heck out of you guys. I wish we could be in class and do this thing in person, but hopefully you're learning a little bit. Hopefully you're getting a little something. Just couple things. Just make sure you are keeping up and not falling behind. If you do get a 0 for an assignment, you can still finish it. Just make sure you finish it, submit it, and then email me, and then I'll look at that. But do not fall behind. Okay, you will regret that. I'm giving you plenty of time, trying not to overwhelm you to get assignments done. So make sure you take advantage of that. Do little bits at a time, so you're not worn out. But definitely make sure you're getting that stuff done. Okay. Also, make sure if something doesn't make sense or if you're confused, make sure you're emailing me, and we can hop on a Google chat and kind of work through that if that's what you need. The worst thing you can do is just guess and assume and just put all the wrong stuff down. We want to make sure that you're learning something. So if you're stuck or confused, email me. Let's make something happen. Check your emails regularly too. That way, if you do email me and I get back to you, we can make that happen in a timely manner without waiting multiple days in between communications. So just make sure you're doing that. Please make sure you do the survey that I sent out on Monday. I need everybody to do that, please. Make sure you have your parents read the parent letter and then take the survey yourself. Okay. Administration asked me to do that, so I need as many of you to do that as possible. Okay. Email me if you have any questions on that. So in this video, I want to go over the food chain and food web assignment that we just finished, give you the answers for those so that you can go back and double check everything. And then I also want to kind of show you a couple things in regards to uploading pictures, because that's going to be something you're going to be doing regularly. And so that way you can do it correctly. If for some reason you didn't get a picture uploaded into your assignment and I took off points for that, make sure that you email me that picture and you'll be squared away. Last thing before we jump into this, make sure that when I put in these grades, I'm putting comments on your assignment in Canvas. Okay, so make sure you go back and look at those comments that I left, and then fix anything that you're lacking. As far as the food webs go, a lot of you had kind of flipped it, so it was plant parts on top, not on the bottom. Don't worry about redoing that. Just know the next time I ask you to make a food web, plant parts, the producer should always be at the bottom, and then it builds up in a pyramid like structure. And we'll look at that here in just a second. So going through here, obviously you should have started and took the notes over this section. That should have helped you out a lot. We introduced these terms: producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers, trophic level, food chain, food web. Okay, those are kind of the big ideas that we really needed to understand and utilize in this assignment. Okay, so we started by looking at these food chains. Okay, food chains are looking at a specific chain of organisms that eat each other. Okay, this is what you then should have used to make your food web. Okay, so knowing that this is your producer, anything that eats the producer is going to be a primary consumer most likely, and then building that food chain or food web, based on these interactions. Okay, so this was to help you understand what's eating what, so that as you built that food chain, you could go back and check that. I'm not going to go through that. What I want to start with is going through the food web. I pulled a couple great examples from some classes, and that is these two right here. I really like these for multiple reasons. Notice that this one is extremely organized, and that's really important because it allows you to see it a lot clearer. Some of yours were just jumbled all over the place, and that works, but this helps you really keep organized. And when I tell you, go look at this organism. What is it? Is it a tertiary, secondary, primary, so on and so forth? If it's organized like that, you can very easily find that. So I believe this was John. So John, well done. Notice here, plant parts. These are your producers. Producers are always at the bottom of the food web. And then from there, you have your primary consumers. These are the things that eat the producers. Okay. And then from here, these guys are kind of tweeners. These can be classified as primary consumers because they do eat the producers. But some of them, like the raccoon, it eats the producer and it eats the primary consumer. It eats the primary, see if I can get this right. It eats the producer and it eats a secondary consumer. And that's really important here because this guy can be considered a primary consumer, but it can also be considered a tertiary consumer based on what it's eating, right? Because the mouse eats producers and primary consumers, so that makes the mouse a secondary consumer. And so if the raccoon's eating the mouse and it's eating the plant parts, then you could consider this a tertiary consumer. Okay, so know that it's not always going to be perfectly layered in regards to primary, secondary, tertiary, because some organisms eat everything, right? And if that's the case, it's going to be multiple classifications. Okay, this one is a great example as well. Okay, again, notice that you're always starting with your producers on the bottom. You're building up from your primary to secondary to tertiary consumers, moving upward, okay? And then the arrows, notice that the arrows are always pointing to what is eating, not what is being eaten, okay? So the plants are being eaten by the mouse. So the arrow's pointing to the mouse, okay? Those are a few things that were kind of messed up in some people, so just keep that in mind for the next time we do that. Okay, so let's go back to this guy. Let's kind of fly through this real quick. I don't want to go over all of them. I just want to touch on a few key ones because I feel like a lot of this is pretty good. Let me get something pulled up here real quick. Okay, so let's start here. So looking at your food web, what type of species produce energy for the web? Okay, those are going to be your producers, your plants. And where does that energy originate from? It always originates from the sun. The sun gives all energy to everything. Okay, so then list the names of the living things in the forest ecosystem that are producers. There was only one producer, and that was the plant parts. Okay, this list one thing that only eats plants in the food webs that could have been, list those things, not one thing. That could have been your insects, your crickets, the sparrow, the snails, the earthworms. Okay, they only eat the producers. Okay. When something eats only producers, it is known as a primary consumer. Come up with another name that we can use for these organisms. Herbivore would be the term that we would use for that. Herbivores only eat plants. Okay, so our primary consumers will always be what we consider herbivores. Okay, and you would have seen that term in your notes at the beginning of this assignment. So define a secondary consumer based on your definition of a primary consumer. A secondary consumer is something that eats the primary consumer. Okay, so it's going to be something that eats the thing that is eating the producers. Okay. All right, so now it is asking list those things that are only secondary consumers. Secondary consumers in this food web, it's kind of hard to see, but we're looking for things that are eating these guys, right? So you could say only eating those could be, you could classify the mouse as that. Most likely, we're going to be primarily looking at the mouse, and then let's see what else we can find here that's only eating that. You could consider the hawk because the hawk is eating the sparrow. This is a really tough question because there's most of the secondary consumers are also eating other things. Okay, so that might not be a perfect answer, and that's okay. Don't always need to have a perfect answer. So let's look here at number 9. Number 9, so what is another name for an animal that is only a secondary consumer? This is going to be a carnivore, right? Carnivore is going to be an organism that eats animals, okay? Eats other animals, not plants, okay? So generally your secondary consumers who are eating the primary consumers are going to be carnivores, okay? Then we have this question of list the consumers that both eat plants and animals, okay? So the mouse and raccoon would be good examples of this. They eat the plants, but they also eat other animals. Jump down to question 12. That asks, what's another name for an animal that eats both plants and animals? That is an omnivore, okay? So again, our producers are eaten by herbivores, which are our primary consumers. Our primary consumers are eaten by carnivores, which are meat eaters, right? And then we have these omnivores, which can eat both. They can eat the plants and animals, okay? An example of an omnivore in this food web would be your raccoon, right? The raccoon is eating mice, but it's also eating plant parts, okay? So that would be considered an omnivore. Okay, so then jumping down to question 13, what would happen on the to the food web if all the plants were removed? Well, think about it. If all the plants are removed, then everything dies. Okay. 14, name and describe how 3 different animals might be affected if foxes were removed. So this could have various answers. Just keep in mind that if you remove an organism from the food web, it's going to wreak havoc, right? Because something is then not being eaten. So then it's going to continue to reproduce and probably overpopulate, right? But also something is going to lose its food. So if we look at our food web here, the foxes, excuse me, the foxes actually don't get eaten by anything, if I recall. Let me just double check. Right, so our foxes are top dog, right? So they're not being eaten by anything, but what they're going to help is other organisms from being taken away, right? So if you remove the foxes, the animals that it eats, they're going to be able to populate even more because they're not being eaten. So that's going to help those populations. Okay, so there could be multiple different answers here. This last question, okay, this one was probably the toughest, but looks like most of us got it. So again, what this is saying is that as organisms eat organisms, they are only getting 10% of the energy that came from the producers, right? So if we look at the plant parts having 100 joules, which is the measurement of energy, 100 joules, 10% of that is going to go to the cricket, right? 10% of 100 is going to be 10. So cricket is going to get 10 joules of the original energy from the plants. The other 90% is being used, right, to live, to make energy, to live life, do all those things. The robin is then getting 10% of that, which is going to be 1 joule. And then the fox is going to get 10% of that, which ends up being 0.1 joule. Okay, so 0.1 joule is your answer for that here. Okay, so please double check all your answers. Go back through that. Make sure you got everything. If you missed something, fix it. If you have questions on any of this, please email me, let me know. Again, I'll be happy to sit down and go through these with you. Please, 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 please make sure you are keeping up. Make sure you are asking questions. Do not fall through the cracks. Okay? If you need anything, let me know. Miss the heck out of you guys. Feel free to hop in the Google chat, the Google Meet between 12 and 1 every day. Say, hey, I'll generally drop in for a little bit, if not the entire time. So if y'all just want to have some social interaction, say, hey, so that I can check in on y'all, see how y'all are doing, and then just talk to people, which I know we aren't doing a lot. So feel free to do that. Otherwise, have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I will talk to y'all later.